we are going to talk about how to navigate the dash, also go through all the features of the dash. First, to switch the pages, you simply press either the left or the right bottom of the screen, and this would go through the pages of the selected themes that you have on. To get to the buttons page on MaxxECU or Haltech, you simply tap the center of the screen, and this will bring up the CAN button page. Each button on top, the 6 buttons on top, are toggle buttons, so you could toggle them on and off, and then 2 on the left and this 2 on the right would give you the option of momentarily pressing them. So once your finger on them, they would be active. Once your finger is off of them, they would be inactive. From the settings page, you have a brief description of what the button does, along with the CAN ID it is assigned to on the Max. You could also change the name of the buttons on this page. So simply press the button that you want to change, edit it, click OK, and then hit save. Whichever page you have selected, you could easily go to your buttons page, or you can long press the middle of the screen and this will bring up the menu. From the menu, you have all your settings here, including where you would actually set up the page that you want to see, or the gauges, that is. From whatever page you're on, once you go into the menu and you hit edit current page, it will bring up the page that you were on, and then from here now you could choose whichever readings you want to see on each gauge. So for instance, you want to choose injector duty, and you maybe want to see coolant here. You can do this for all the values, and then you hit save, and that would bring up your gauges on the screen that you edited. The screen also displays any errors that comes up while the vehicle is operating, and you simply hit that text area and it will show you the error that is present on the Max or the Haltech. From here you could choose to clear the errors, ignore it for 10 minutes, or ignore until the ECU restarts. Some errors don't come off unless you maybe need to change your sensor or whatever the case may be, or maybe just be a simple limit error that came up. Clearing the errors is simple. Hit clear, clears the errors if it's able to go away. Back to the menu. From here, we'll be able to set up the starter page, and for each theme, you can set which page you would like to be displayed on the boot on each time you restart the vehicle. So for instance, S2 is the Haltech page that you would be accustomed to, and then race, for instance, we would go with R6. Hit save, and whenever the dash is rebooted, that page will come up here once the theme was selected. Back to the menu, and let's talk about the LED settings. So the LED settings, we have a couple settings here. For instance, on the LED function, you can set to have it as shift right only, progressive RPM only, and shift right and progressive RPM. Or you could choose to have the LED off. I have it set as off for this video, and you can also have the shift point value. So this value would be the RPM at which, just before red line, you want the shift light to come on at. So you could choose it to be 200, 150, 1000 RPM, 900 RPM, it doesn't matter. It goes all the way up to 1500 RPM. So for instance, you could have it for 350 RPM before rev limit, and you hit save. The LED brightness, that is for the progressive RPM, and the progressive color, these values here would change the color of the progressive RPM. So if you were to change the numbers of the red and the blue and the green, you would get different colors. The settings on top here, those are for custom dashes where you have the LEDs mounted on the sides. For a standard off-the-shelf dash, these values already came preset, so no need to play with them. Hit save. For your updates, and this is what would update the internal MCU. I talked about how to update the dash in a previous video, so we won't go through that right now. Warning levels are easy. We have warning levels for all the basic stuff that you would want, and when they are set to 0, the meaning that they are off. And for instance, let's say coolant temperature, we want this warning to come up when we at 90 degrees, and maybe we want a low oil pressure of 10 psi, and you hit save. You could also do a low voltage of let's say 12.9. The units that you're seeing here, even though you have the unit set as something else on the dash, you would always need to set them at Celsius or PSI. Hit save. Let's talk about the settings under GDash. Here we have the unit settings, and here you could change if you need a different unit for degrees, pressure, or speed. You always hit save, and then back to the menu. From here you could also reset the dash if you need it to be factory reset. In CAN settings is where you'll choose your protocol, either MaxxECU or Haltech. So for instance, let's say you're setting it up for a Haltech ECU. You would choose Haltech, and you would choose the 1 megabit CAN bit rate, and you would hit restart dash. You always need to restart the dash when changing the CAN bit rate. We'll also talk about when on the Haltech protocol that you would need to set your rev limit. So this only applies to Haltech. On MaxxECU, you could the rev limit is automatically picked up from your MaxxECU, but on the Haltech you have to set that rev limit. So for instance, your rev limit is at 6800, and the dash will use this value to calculate your shift point and your progressive RPM. On your Haltech protocol, you would see this tab, generic sensor rename. Haltech has a couple channels that they assign, that you could choose whatever you want to broadcast over the CAN that they don't have predefined. So for instance, on generic sensor 1, you may want to rename that as whatever you want to broadcast, and then whatever that value would have chosen on the Haltech, you would have to select the same thing here. Maybe it's a switch, a voltage reading, temperature, percentage, whatever you would have set it to. You need to make the same setting, same change here. You hit save, and then you return. You have the option of viewing live data if you're on the Haltech protocol or on the MaxxECU protocol, and that simply gives you all the data that the ECU is putting out. So we'll switch over to Max, as I have the dash connected to Max right now. And as this came up here, we'll talk about the warning bands. So we set the oil pressure to come on at 10 psi. So anything under 10 psi will bring up the band. So right now we're seeing minus 11 psi here for oil pressure. And if we were to bring that psi up, you would see the band flip here. But as long as that psi drops underneath that 10, it brings up the band. So let's say, for instance, the warning that you assigned is not important, so you probably know why the warning came up and you want to ignore the warning for some particular reason. You could tap the band and this will ignore the reading, the warning, for 60 seconds. After 60 seconds, the band is going to come back up. You could choose to hit the band again and make it disappear, and at that point the band will not come back up until the dash is reset or the problem or the issue was resolved. This happens for coolant and all the other warnings that you would have seen in the menu. So under live data, you see all the values here that Max is putting out over CAN, or the real-time values. And these values will normally be changing rapidly. So you could choose to have a fast refresh rate or a slow refresh rate, and it will basically update the screen at a slower refresh rate for basically looking at the values more easily, or actually seeing the real-time changes of the value. You have 2 pages for Max to view all the data, and this way you could see all the values in real time. This applies to the Haltech as well. Switching teams is easy as well. When you come into the menu, you have a drop down here where you could choose between street, race, or legacy. On the street, it's typically pages that you would use when, well, you're on the street. And then you have the race team, basically for track. You hit save, and these teams give you bigger numbers and somewhat of less information, not all the information you'll want to see while you're going down the track. On this particular page, you have the option, and only on this page you have the option of the first 2 buttons on the Haltech keypad or the MaxxECU keypad. So whatever changes you would have made here or you would have made from the keypad would be the same changes on this page. From any team, we spoke about the ECU error, and this would be visible on any one of the pages that you're on. The Haltech keypad is a little bit different from the MaxxECU keypad. So switching over to Haltech, we'll be able to see the difference. The Haltech keypad gives you 10 buttons. These buttons, you could rename them under this tab. Simply editing, click OK, and hit save. The Haltech keypad gives you the same options of standard Haltech keypad, where you have three colors. You have a red, yellow, and green. The red indicates that there's an error with that button, maybe in how you set up, or maybe a malfunction with the function assigned to that button. Then you have green, and that would come up when the button is enabled. You also have yellow, which indicates that the function that assigned to that button is active. So again, just to recap, to navigate the screen, bottom left, bottom right, and you would switch the pages. And then center tap for your buttons, or long tap for your menu. And that's it.